I'm James, I'm 32 years old, and at my family's Christmas dinner, my own mother lied to my grandfather's face about stealing the house he'd bought for me. Before I tell you how I exposed it all in front of the entire family using a single, damning voicemail, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Alright, let's get into it. The scene was my grandparents' house. A sprawling craftsman home just outside of Seattle that always smelled like pine needles and old, beloved books. For our family, Christmas Eve dinner here was a sacred tradition. It was supposed to be the one night of the year where all conflicts were paused, a night for peace and gratitude. But as I sat at that long oak table, a knot of pure ice was forming in my stomach. I hadn't spoken a single word to my parents in 3 weeks, not since they unceremoniously blocked my number. Yet here they were, performing for the crowd, acting as if we were the perfect, happy family. My mother, Diane, kept patting my arm, her smile as bright and fake as the plastic holly on the mantelpiece. My father, Robert, the lifelong master of conflict avoidance, just kept his eyes glued to his plate, carefully cutting his turkey into needlessly small pieces. My grandfather, Howard, a man whose principles were as solid as the foundation of the house we were in, raised his glass of red wine. To family, he said, his voice warm and resonant. And to new beginnings. James, my boy, he said, turning his kind, shockingly blue eyes on me. The entire table quieted down to listen. Tell me, how's life in the house I bought you? Are you all settled in? Have you met the neighbors? Silence. It was absolute. Every fork stopped midway to a mouth. Every side conversation died in an instant. My brother, Michael, the golden child, shot a barely perceptible, nervous glance at our mother. My Aunt Martha, my mom's sister and the only one in the family who ever saw through her games, narrowed her eyes just slightly, a silent observer taking in every detail. I opened my mouth, 100 different truths fighting their way up my throat. But my mother, as always, was faster. "Oh, Dad, you must be mistaken," she chirped, laughing a light, airy laugh that didn't reach her eyes in the slightest. "We're just managing the property for him for now. He wasn't quite ready for that kind of responsibility. You know how it is with these kids today." She looked directly at me, a silent, steely command in her eyes. "Play along. Don't you dare ruin this." I felt the blood pound in my ears, hot and furious. The lie was so smooth, so disgustingly effortless. It was almost a work of art. I looked across the table at the faces of my family, and in that split second I made a decision. I excused myself from the table, my legs feeling strangely unsteady. In the quiet of the upstairs bathroom, I gripped the edges of the porcelain sink and stared at my own reflection. Then, I pulled out my phone. I didn't open a game or a news app. I opened a single password-protected folder on my home screen. The label was simple, The House Project. Inside was my entire case. Every screenshot, every photo, every file I had collected over the past 2 agonizing months. My evidence, my truth. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I had given them 2 months. 60 days to come clean, to do the right thing, to treat me like a son instead of an inconvenience. Now that time was up. As I walked back to the dining room, I knew this wasn't just another awkward family drama. This was going to be a trial, and I was about to become the star witness, prosecutor, and judge all rolled into one. To truly understand the weight of that Christmas dinner, the sheer gravity of that lie, you have to go back 2 months, to what was, without a doubt, the single best day of my life. It was my college graduation day. After 4 long years of working a full-time logistics job during the day and pounding coffee to get through engineering classes at night, I finally had my degree. I was proud, bone-deep exhausted, and so ready to finally start my life. My grandfather pulled me aside during the small family celebration afterward. He was beaming, his pride in me so tangible it felt like a physical warmth spreading through my chest. He pressed a small, heavy, velvet-covered box into my hand. Inside wasn't a watch or a set of cufflinks. It was a single, shiny, old-fashioned brass key. "This is the key to your future, son," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "A house. It's yours. I just closed on it last week. No mortgage, no rent. A foundation to build your life on. It's part of your inheritance, given to you now when you need it most, not when you're an old man like me. I was utterly speechless. Tears, hot and immediate, welled up in my eyes. I hugged him so tightly I thought his old bones might creak. A house, my own house, in the Seattle area that was like being handed a winning lottery ticket. It was more than I had ever dreamed of. It was freedom. It was respect. It was a testament from the man I respected most in the world that all my hard work had meant something. I called my Aunt Martha on the way to see it for the first time, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. She was my mom's older sister, but they were night and day. Where my mom was all about appearances and maintaining control, Aunt Martha was about honesty and heart. She let out a whoop of genuine joy when I told her, "Oh, Jimmy, that's wonderful. Your grandfather sees you. He really sees all the work you've put in. I'm so proud of you, honey." Her validation felt almost as good as the key in my pocket. The house was perfect. A modest, two-bedroom craftsman from the 1940s in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It needed some work, sure, but it had good bones. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I imagined where my couch would go, where I'd set up my home office for late-night projects. I could see myself in the garage, finally setting up the workshop I'd always wanted. A place to tinker with engines and build things with my own two hands. This was it. This was where my life would finally, truly begin. The very next day, I drove over with a box of basic cleaning supplies and a tape measure, my heart thumping with a giddy excitement. I put the key in the lock. It slid in smoothly. I turned it. Nothing. It didn't budge. I tried again, jiggling it, putting my shoulder into the door. It was completely solid. I looked closer, my brow furrowed in confusion. The lock itself looked different. It was shinier, a modern brass finish, completely different from the aged, patinaed hardware I remembered from the day before. A cold, sick feeling, the kind that starts in your gut and spreads outwards, began to creep up my spine. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. "Oh, honey, thank God you called," she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. "The plumber came by this morning to check on the water heater. There was a small leak under the sink, and he accidentally broke the front door lock trying to get in with the spare key we gave him. Can you believe the incompetence? Don't worry, we had a locksmith come out and replace it right away. I have the new key right here on the counter. We'll get it to you." It sounded plausible. Annoying but plausible. "Okay," I said, the sick feeling receding slightly. "Can you swing by and drop it off? I'm here now. I was hoping to get some measurements." "Oh, not today, sweetie. Your father and I are absolutely swamped with errands. We'll get it to you sometime this week, I promise." A week passed. No key. I called again, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "The pest control guy had to tent the whole house," my dad said this time, his voice flat and emotionless. "The inspector found a serious termite issue in the crawl space. You can't go in there for at least another week. It's for your own safety, son." Another week. Another phone call. Another excuse. This time it was the roof. The roofer found some soft spots in the plywood under the shingles. My mother explained, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We have to get the whole thing re-shingled before the winter rains start. You don't want to move in just to have a leaky roof, do you?" This became the frustrating rhythm of my life for the next month. Every time I asked for my key, a new, expensive, and catastrophic problem had miraculously appeared out of thin air. I started to feel like I was going crazy. I tried calling my grandfather a couple of times, just to thank him again and maybe get his advice on a good roofer, but my mother always seemed to answer his phone. "Oh, Dad's napping, James. Is everything okay? Just let me know what you need, and I'll be sure to pass the message on." Of course, I never heard back from him, and I felt foolish calling again and again like a child. My parents had effectively become the impenetrable gatekeepers to my own house. The frustration was a constant, simmering burn. I was still living in my cramped, overpriced apartment, my carefully saved up furniture money dwindling with every rent payment that passed. My dream, my future, was sitting just a few miles away, locked and supposedly empty. Or so I thought. The turning point, the moment suspicion hardened into certainty, came on a cold, rainy Tuesday night. I was driving home from a late shift at the engineering firm, feeling utterly defeated and demoralized. On a whim, I took a detour and drove down the street of my house. I just wanted to look at it to remind myself it was real. As I drove by slowly, my headlights cutting through the drizzle, I noticed the lights were on inside. A soft, warm, inviting glow spilled from the living room window. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who was in my house? I parked down the block, my mind racing through terrifying possibilities. Burglars? Squatters? I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over 911. But then, something else caught my eye, something that made the world tilt on its axis. My phone's Wi-Fi screen was open, from when I'd connected at a coffee shop earlier. It was picking up the available networks in the area. And there, sitting at the top of the list with 5 full bars of signal, was a network name that made my blood run cold. Wilson's Cozy Retreat. Couldn't be. My parents weren't that audacious, were they? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the words into the search bar. I opened a web browser and searched for Wilson's Cozy Retreat. The first result was a listing on Airbnb. And there it was, my house. The photos were professionally done, staged to look warm and inviting. The living room was fully furnished in my mother's signature, impersonal style, gray everything, pillows with inspirational quotes in cursive on the walls, a fake orchid on the coffee table. There was a picture of the kitchen, with a welcome basket of wine and crackers on the counter. The bedroom, my bedroom, had a neatly made bed and fresh towels folded at the foot of it, like a hotel. I scrolled down the page, my breath catching in my throat, a wave of nausea washing over me. The listing was hosted by Diane and Robert. There were a dozen glowing reviews from guests. A wonderful stay. The hosts were so communicative and helpful. Charming house in a great location. We'll definitely be back. 5 stars. The perfect weekend getaway. They weren't just keeping me out. They were running a business. They were renting out my gift, my future, my home, to a rotating cast of strangers for a profit. The excuses, the lies, the fake concern. It was all an elaborate, disgusting cover. I sat in my car for what felt like an hour, the rain drumming a mournful rhythm on the roof, the glow from my phone screen lighting up my face in the darkness. The initial shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard anger I had never felt before in my entire life. My first instinct was to drive to their house, to pound on their door, to scream and demand answers. But I knew how that would go. They would twist it, turn it back on me, call me ungrateful, tell me I was overreacting. They had been gaslighting me my whole life, always favoring my older brother Michael, always treating me like the irresponsible screw-up who needed their constant guidance. No. A direct confrontation was what they expected. It would be my word against theirs, and in the court of our family, my word had never been enough. I drove home, but I didn't go to sleep. I opened my laptop and created that folder, The House Project. I took screenshots of the entire Airbnb listing, the photos, the glowing reviews, the calendar showing it was booked solid for the next 3 months. Then I remembered something. A shared family cloud drive my dad had set up years ago for sharing holiday photos. A drive I hadn't looked at in ages. On a hunch, I logged in. He must have forgotten about it, because there, in a folder labeled Household, was a spreadsheet simply titled Rental Income. I clicked it open. My heart stopped. It detailed every payment, every booking, every single dollar they had made from my house. I saved a copy immediately, my heart pounding with a mixture of horror and vindication. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was a case, and I was going to build it piece by agonizing piece until it was airtight and undeniable. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet, methodical obsession. By day, I was an engineer, designing systems and solving problems with logic and precision. By night, I became a private investigator in my own life story. I documented every new text message, every ignored phone call. I drove by the house on weekends and, from a distance, took time-stamped photos of different cars in the driveway, of families with suitcases walking up to the front door. Each photo was another brick in the wall of their deceit, another piece of evidence for my growing file. I felt a grim satisfaction with each addition, but it was coupled with a deep, aching sadness. This was my own family I was building a case against. I knew I needed more than just pictures and spreadsheets. I needed their own words. I needed something that couldn't be explained away, something that captured the true nature of their betrayal. My chance came about a month before Christmas. I had just written another $1,000 check for the rent on my tiny apartment, money I had mentally earmarked for a new couch for my new house. The bitterness was a physical taste in my mouth, metallic and sour. I decided to try calling one more time. I needed to hear the lie from them directly, one last time before I made my final move. My mother picked up on the second ring, her voice as smooth and sweet as honey. "James, what a surprise. I was just thinking about you." "I want to talk about the house, Mom," I said, forgoing any pleasantries. I kept my voice as steady and level as I could. "Oh, honey, is that still on your mind?" She sighed, a master of feigned exhaustion. "We're handling it. Trust me." "Handling it?" "I saw it, Mom. I saw the Airbnb listing." I let the statement hang in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. For a split second, the mask of maternal concern slipped, and I could feel her panic. But only for a second. She recovered instantly. "I don't know what you're talking about, James," she said, her voice turning cold and hard as steel. "You must be mistaken. It's probably a neighbor's house that looks similar. It has your name on it, Mom. Diane and Robert. It has your fake orchid on the coffee table. It's my house. Don't lie to me." "You watch your tone with me, young man," she snapped, her voice rising. "We have done nothing but try to help you. That house is a huge responsibility. A big inheritance like that comes with property taxes, with insurance, with upkeep, with 1,000 things you know nothing about. We were trying to build up a little nest egg for you, to handle those expenses so you wouldn't be burdened by them." The audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking gall of her twisting this into an act of parental generosity, made me see red. Burdened? It was a gift you stole from me so you could make money off of it. "I want my key, and I want you to take that listing down. Now." This is when she lost it completely. The calm, controlling facade shattered into a million pieces, and the raw, condescending woman I knew was hiding underneath came roaring out. "A key? You want a key? You can't even manage to remember to pay your credit card bill on time without me reminding you. You think you're ready for a house? You're still a child, James. A child who plays with expensive toys. You will never be ready." I was about to fire back, to list all the ways I had proven my responsibility. But then the line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I tried to call back. The call didn't go through. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my dad's number. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text message. "This isn't over." It didn't deliver. The bubble next to it was a stark, unforgiving green. They had blocked me, their own son. I sank onto my couch, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean of every emotion except a vast, empty ache. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It had never really been just about the house. It was about the fact that my own parents saw me as so incompetent, so worthless, that they would rather cheat me, lie to me, and then erase me than ever admit I was a capable adult. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A notification popped up. New voicemail. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful leap, thinking maybe it was my dad, calling to apologize, to fix this. I pressed play, my thumb trembling. It wasn't an apology. It was my mother's voice, seething with a rage that was almost chilling to listen to. It was the unfiltered monologue she'd been waiting her whole life to give me. "I can't believe your nerve, James." The recording began, her voice tight and venomous. "Calling me, making accusations. After everything we've done for you. I told you, you are not ready for a house like that. You are not responsible enough. So you can stop your whining and your pathetic little detective games. We are handling it. It's being taken care of by adults. You should be down on your knees, grateful that you have parents who know what's best for you, because you so clearly don't. Do not call me about this again. You'll thank us for this one day, when you finally grow up. Click. I listened to it once, then again, and a third time. The cruelty in her tone, the absolute conviction that she was in the right. It was all there. I saved the voicemail immediately, backing it up to the cloud, to my laptop, and to an external hard drive. This was it. This was the smoking gun. This was the nuclear warhead in my arsenal of evidence. This wasn't a he said, she said argument anymore. This was her, in her own words, confessing to her motives, her actions, and her utter contempt for me. Just as I was saving the file for the third time, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number from my home state. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hey, Jimmy? It's your cousin, Tyler. Tyler was Aunt Martha's son. We were close as kids, building forts and playing video games, but had drifted apart as adults, as cousins often do. He lived just a few towns over from my house. Hey man, it's been a while. What's up? Weird question, he said, and he sounded hesitant, almost nervous. But, is everything okay with you and your folks? And that new house Grandpa got you? It's a long story, Tyler. A really, really long one. Why? Well, look, I don't want to start any family drama, he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. But I was at that big hardware store over on Maple Street last month, picking up some stuff for my deck. I was in the aisle next to your mom and dad. I was behind a big display of mulch, so I don't think they saw me. They were talking about the house. Your mom was saying something about how the Airbnb income was a nice little bonus and that it would teach you a lesson about appreciating things. And your dad sounded worried. He asked her, what if he finds out? I held my breath, waiting for the rest. And your mom? She just laughed, man. She laughed and said, oh, Robbie, don't be silly. He'll never know. He believes anything we tell him. I closed my eyes. The phone pressed hard against my ear. Hearing it from a third party, from someone with no agenda, made it all feel sickeningly, horribly real. He wasn't just confirming my suspicions. He was confirming my worst fears about how they saw me. A gullible child. A fool. I knew it, I whispered, the words barely making it out of my throat. Look, man, I'm really sorry, Tyler said, his voice full of genuine regret. I didn't know what to do. I felt like a jerk for eavesdropping, but I felt worse saying nothing. When my mom mentioned you were sounding really down lately, I figured I had to call you. No, man. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't even name. You have no idea how much this helps. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my apartment for a long time. The anger was still there, a burning coal in my chest. But now there was something else underneath it. A cold, clear sense of purpose. An icy resolve. They thought I was a child. They thought I was weak. They had blocked me, silenced me, and stolen from me, all while planning to sit around a Christmas tree with me and pretend we were a happy, normal family. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the darkness. I went to an airline website and booked a flight to Seattle for December 23rd. The time for quiet evidence gathering was over. It was time to go home for the holidays. It was time for a reckoning. Arriving at my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve felt like walking onto a stage set for a play where I was the only one who hadn't read the script, or rather, I was the only one who had read the real script, while everyone else was performing a feel-good holiday special. The warmth of the grand stone fireplace didn't reach me. The cheerful carols playing softly in the background sounded jarring and hollow to my ears. My parents greeted me at the door with a performance worthy of an Oscar. My mother wrapped me in a tight, suffocating hug, her expensive perfume cloying and sweet. James, we were so worried when we didn't hear from you. We thought you might not make it, she exclaimed, her voice pitched just loud enough for my grandparents, who were in the living room, to hear. A masterful lie, painting me as the neglectful son. My father clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard, his eyes darting around nervously, unable to meet mine for more than a fraction of a second. Good to have you home, son. Merry Christmas. My brother, Michael, arrived shortly after with his wife, Jessica. Michael was 2 years older than me, a successful regional sales manager with a sleek German car and an easy, unearned confidence that came from a lifetime of being the favored son. He and my mother were two peas in a pod, thriving on praise and public validation. He clapped me on the back with a patronizing thud. "Hey, little brother, still driving that old Civic?" he asked with a smirk, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe if you're good, Santa will bring you a new one." He thought it was hilarious. My parents fawned over him, asking about his recent promotion at work, praising Jessica's new cashmere coat. I was just part of the scenery, an afterthought they had to occasionally acknowledge. It was the story of my life, but for the first time it didn't hurt. It just fueled the cold, hard fire inside me. Every condescending remark, every fake smile, was just another piece of kindling. The saving grace was the other side of the family, my mother's side, who seemed to have inherited all the integrity she lacked. Aunt Martha gave me a long, searching hug and whispered in my ear, "Don't let them get to you. I see what's going on." Uncle George, her husband, a no-nonsense businessman with a handshake that could crush walnuts, looked me in the eye. "Good to see you, James. Integrity is a rare thing these days. Don't ever lose it." His words felt pointed, a small vote of confidence that meant the world. Then there was my cousin Emma, Tyler's younger sister. She had just passed the bar exam with flying colors and was working for a prestigious law firm in the city. She cornered me by the eggnog bowl, her expression sharp and serious, cutting through the holiday fluff. "Okay, spill it," she said, her voice low and direct. "I talked to Tyler. I know something's going on. You look like you're about to go to war." I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't planned on bringing anyone else into this. It was my fight, my burden to carry. "James," she said, her tone shifting from concerned cousin to professional lawyer. "Don't be an idiot. You look like you're in way over your head. Whatever it is, talk to me." So I did. I pulled her into the quiet den, away from the fake holiday cheer, the room smelling of old leather and my grandfather's pipe tobacco. I took out my phone and I showed her everything. The Airbnb listing, the income spreadsheet from the cloud, the time-stamped photos of strangers in my driveway. I didn't show her the voicemail yet. I was saving that, the emotional core of my case. She scrolled through the evidence on my phone, her face growing grimmer and more severe with each swipe. She wasn't looking at it like a cousin who was hearing family gossip. She was analyzing it like a professional building a case. When she finished, she looked up at me, and all the warmth was gone from her eyes, replaced by a steely, professional glint. "James," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "this is so much worse than I thought. This isn't just a family disagreement. This is illegal. Like, seriously illegal." "I know." "No, you don't know," she insisted, leaning forward. "Legally, what they did with the house is called theft by conversion. They took your legal property and converted it for their own financial gain. And the lying, the elaborate excuses to keep you from accessing your own property. A prosecutor could argue that constitutes fraud. These are serious crimes. This isn't just about getting your key back. This is about them committing felonies against you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. Fraud, felonies, crimes. Hearing them from a lawyer, from someone who knew the real-world consequences, made the whole situation feel heavier, more real, and infinitely more dangerous. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Emma looked me straight in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "That depends entirely on what you want the outcome to be. Do you want to sue them? You could. You'd almost certainly win. It would tear this family apart forever. A brutal legal battle with depositions and subpoenas. It could trigger a divorce for Jessica and Michael if she was forced to testify against them. It would be mutually assured destruction. Or Do you want to handle this another way? She gestured with her head towards the living room, where my grandfather was laughing at something my uncle said, his deep, hearty laugh filling the house. The man who gave you the gift is the highest court in this family. His opinion is the only one that matters more than a judge's. In this house, he is the judge. She was right. Suing my parents was the nuclear option. It would cause wreckage I couldn't even begin to imagine. But my grandfather, he was the patriarch. He was the source of the gift, and he was a man who valued truth above all else. Justice in this family flowed from him. He's the one, I said, a new, hard resolve solidifying in my chest. He needs to know the truth. Good, Emma said with a firm, decisive nod. Then you need to pick your moment. You have the evidence. You have the truth on your side. Do not let them control the narrative for one more second. We walked back out to the party just as my mom announced it was time for dinner, her voice ringing with false cheer. The storm was gathering. The pressure was building in my chest, a physical weight. I felt like I was standing in the eye of a hurricane, a moment of unnatural, terrifying calm before the full force of the storm was unleashed. And it was all going to start with a single, innocent question from the head of the table. The dinner was an exercise in agony. I moved food around my plate, the taste of turkey and stuffing turning to ash in my mouth. My mother, in her element, kept the conversation flowing, a master conductor of deflection and superficial chatter. She told a long, boring story about Michael's childhood soccer trophies, praised my father's new golf clubs, and completely, utterly ignored me. It was a strategic erasure, a public demonstration of my irrelevance. Then it came. Grandpa Howard wiped his mouth with his cloth napkin, a contented, benevolent smile on his face, and he asked the question that would bring the whole house of cards crashing down. So, how's life in the house I bought you, son? The silence that fell was heavy, immediate, and profound. It was the sound of 15 people holding their breath. It was the sound of a pin being pulled from a grenade. I saw my mother's smile tighten at the corners into a desperate rictus. I saw my father's knuckles turn white as he gripped his fork, his eyes wide with panic. This was the moment. This was the crossroads. Before I could speak, my mother launched her preemptive strike, that smooth, practiced lie about managing the property for my own good. But this time I was ready. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just let her finish, let the lie hang in the air, thick and foul and obvious to anyone who was really listening. I looked at my grandfather, whose face was a mask of polite confusion. He was a smart man. He knew something was deeply wrong. He just didn't know what it was yet. I calmly placed my own napkin on the table and cleared my throat. "Grandpa," I said, my voice surprisingly clear and steady. "Could I speak with you in your study for a moment? Emma, would you mind joining us?" My mother's face flashed with pure, unadulterated panic. "James, don't bother your grandfather on Christmas Eve with your silly problems," she hissed, her voice a harsh whisper. "It's no bother, Diane," Grandpa Howard said, his eyes fixed on me, sharp and assessing. He folded his napkin deliberately and stood up. "Let's talk." The walk to his study felt a mile long. The festive sounds of the dining room faded behind us, replaced by a tense silence. The three of us entered the small, wood-paneled room, filled with the comforting scent of old books and pipe tobacco. My grandfather sat behind his large mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured for us to sit in the leather chairs opposite him. He didn't say a word. He just waited, his hands folded on the desk in front of him. He was giving me the floor. I took a deep breath and began. I didn't start with accusations. I started with gratitude. I told him again, my voice thick with genuine emotion, how much the house meant to me, what a powerful symbol it was of his belief in me when so many others in the family, including my own parents, had never shown me the same. Then I took out my phone. "I don't know how to say this, Grandpa," I said, my voice cracking for the first time that night. "So I'm just going to have to show you." I leaned forward and handed him the phone. I showed him the Airbnb listing first. He scrolled through the pictures of the furnished rooms, his brow furrowed in a deep line. "That's Diane's taste, all right," he murmured, his voice low. "Always loved gray." Then I showed him the spreadsheet of rental income, the document my father had so foolishly and carelessly saved to the shared cloud. His eyes narrowed as he saw the columns of dates and dollar amounts, the total at the bottom. The line of his mouth grew thin and hard. I showed him the slideshow of time-stamped photos of strangers' cars in the driveway. Finally, I said, and then, when I tried to confront them about it, "This is what my mother left on my voicemail." I pressed play. The small, cozy room was silent except for the sound of my mother's recorded voice, dripping with venom and condescension. "You are not responsible enough. You should be grateful you have parents who know what's best for you. You'll thank us for this one day, when you finally grow up." When the recording ended, my grandfather didn't speak for a long, long time. He just sat there, staring at the phone in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. His hands, usually so steady when he worked in his woodshop, were trembling with a quiet, contained rage. He looked older than I had ever seen him, the lines around his eyes deeper, etched with a fresh pain. He slowly placed the phone on the desk as if it were a piece of evidence at a crime scene. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a profound sadness and a gathering, terrifying fury. "You tried to call me?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Twice, Grandpa," I confirmed, my own voice quiet. "Mom answered both times. Said you were resting." He closed his eyes for a moment, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He had been lied to and manipulated as much as I had. His gift had been perverted. His trust had been betrayed. The betrayal was doubled. "Emma," he said, turning to my cousin without opening his eyes. "As a lawyer, what is your professional, dispassionate assessment of this situation?" "It's theft and fraud, Grandpa," she said simply, her voice clear and firm. "There's no other way to describe it. It's a clear-cut case." He nodded slowly, a grim finality settling over his features. He stood up, his back ramrod straight. The frail, kindly old man was gone. In his place stood the patriarch, the unshakable head of the Wilson family. "This sickness," he said, his voice like flint, "it needs to be cut out, in front of everyone, so it can never grow back." He walked to the door and pulled it open with a decisive tug. "Get everyone in the living room," he commanded, his voice echoing through the house, silencing all remaining chatter. "Right now." A confused and nervous family shuffled into the living room, drawn by the authority in his tone. My parents looked terrified, like cornered animals. They knew they'd been caught. They just didn't know how bad the punishment was going to be. My grandmother, Elaine, looked from her husband to her daughter with wide, worried eyes. My grandfather stood before the fireplace, his face grim as a thundercloud. The festive mood had evaporated, replaced by a thick, anxious tension that was almost suffocating. "We have a family matter to discuss," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument or interruption. He looked at me, and his expression softened for just a fraction of a second. "James, go ahead, son." My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm as I connected my phone to the large smart TV above the fireplace. The family's confused murmurs died down as my phone screen, with its simple grid of app icons, appeared on the big screen. I didn't say a word. I just let the evidence speak for itself. First, the bright, cheerful homepage of the Wilsons' Cozy Retreat Airbnb listing filled the screen. A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Aunt Martha's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. I saw Uncle George shake his head slowly, a look of utter disgust on his face. Next, I pulled up the spreadsheet. The rows of income, the dates, the guest names, the total at the bottom, $14,850, glowed on the screen in stark black and white. My father made a small, choked sound, like he was being strangled. Then, a slideshow of the time-stamped photos. A minivan with out-of-state plates. A young couple holding hands walking to the front door. A family with young kids unloading beach toys from their trunk. Finally, the screen went black, and I hit play on the voicemail. My mother's voice, her angry, condescending words filled the dead-silent room. Every syllable was a hammer blow, a public indictment. When it finished, the silence was absolute. It was deafening. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. I looked at my mother. Her face was as white as a sheet, her mouth slightly agape. Her carefully constructed world of control and appearances had just been demolished in high definition in front of her entire family. That was taken out of context, she whispered, her voice a pathetic, desperate rasp. My grandfather turned on her, his eyes blazing with righteous fire. Context? He roared, and the force of it made her physically flinch. What context is there for this, Diane? You stole from your own son. You lied to my face in my own home. You used my gift, a symbol of my love and my pride in him, to run a cheap rental scheme behind my back. He turned to my father, who seemed to be shrinking into the plush fabric of the armchair. And you, Robert? You let this happen? You stood by and said nothing while your wife committed a crime against your own son. My father stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The deep, profound silence was his confession. My grandfather's shoulders sagged for a moment, the fury replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. But his voice, when he spoke again, was firm, resolute, and final. This ends tonight. First thing tomorrow morning, I am calling my lawyer. We are drawing up the papers to have the deed legally and properly transferred into James's name, as it should have been from day one. The money you stole from him will be repaid, every last cent. This is not a negotiation. This is a judgment. He looked around the stunned room, his gaze finally resting on me, and a flicker of the warm grandfather I knew returned to his eyes. This house was meant to be a gift. It seems the real gift this Christmas was a long overdue dose of the truth. The explosion had happened. Now came the fallout, the radioactive dust settling on the ruins of our family. The living room was no longer a place of celebration. It was a courtroom after the verdict had been read, and the sentence handed down. The family fractured right before my eyes, splitting into clear, undeniable factions. Aunt Martha and Uncle George immediately came and stood beside me, a silent, solid wall of support. Emma gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. Others, like my grandmother, just stared into the middle distance, aghast, her face a canvas of disbelief and pain, not knowing where to look or what to say. My mother, seeing her power completely and irrevocably stripped away, resorted to her last and most frequently used weapon, tears. She began to sob, great, gulping, theatrical sobs designed to garner sympathy and rewrite her as the victim. I only ever wanted what was best for him, she cried, her words muffled by her hands. I was just trying to protect him. But this time, no one rushed to comfort her. The performance was too transparent, the crime too blatant, the evidence too damning. Her tears fell into a vacuum of cold judgment. Then came a voice we didn't expect, a voice that was usually quiet and agreeable. It was Jessica, my brother Michael's wife. She was pale, her hands twisting in the fabric of her dress in her lap. She's lying, Jessica said, her voice trembling but surprisingly clear in the tense silence. I told Michael this was wrong. From the beginning. I told him he had to say something to you, James, or to Grandpa. All eyes, including mine, snapped to Michael. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut, his face a mottled red. He shot his wife a look of pure, venomous betrayal. Jess, don't, he muttered through clenched teeth. Don't? She shot back, her voice rising with months of pent-up frustration and disgust. Don't what, Michael? Don't tell the truth? I've been listening to you make excuses for months. It's just Mom being Mom. It's better not to get involved. Not get involved? Your brother was being systematically robbed by our parents, and you just sat back and watched because you didn't want to rock the boat. You didn't want to lose your spot as the favorite son. The tension between them was so thick, so poisonous. It felt like the word divorce was hanging in the air, unspoken but imminent. Michael's face, which had been red with embarrassment, was now pale with shame. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't look at anyone. He stared at his expensive, polished leather shoes as if they held the secrets to the universe. I knew it was wrong, he admitted, his voice barely audible, a pathetic mumble. I didn't want to get in the middle of it. It was family business. In the middle of it? I said, and my own voice, when it came out, was colder and sharper than I intended. Michael, there was no middle. There was a right side and a wrong side. And you stood firmly on the wrong one because it was easier. That's when my father, the silent, invisible man, finally broke. He wasn't a monster, not like my mother had been. He was just weak, a man hollowed out by his own cowardice. He slumped forward in his chair, his face in his hands, and his shoulders began to shake. It was the money, he confessed. His voice choked with a shame so profound it was painful to witness. I made a bad investment last year, a guaranteed thing with a friend. I lost a big chunk of our retirement savings. A lot of it. I didn't tell Diane. I was too ashamed. When the house idea came up, she saw it as a way to make it all back quickly, to fix my mistake. I went along with it. I'm so sorry, James. I'm so sorry. His confession didn't excuse his actions, but for the first time, it explained them. He wasn't motivated by pure malice, but by cowardice and desperation. It made the whole situation even sadder, more pathetic. He wasn't a villain. He was just a man who had failed, and who had let that failure poison his character and drag his family down with him. The party was over. The festive spirit had curdled into something toxic and unbearable. People started making quiet, awkward excuses, gathering their coats and gifts, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the ruined Christmas. Later that night, long after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, the only sounds being the ticking of the grandfather clock and the sighing of the fire, I sat alone in the living room, staring into the dying embers. My grandfather came and sat beside me on the couch. For a long time, we just sat in the comfortable silence of men who understood each other without words. I'm proud of you, son, he finally said, his voice soft but firm in the quiet room. I looked at him, confused. Proud of me? For blowing up the family on Christmas Eve. I'm proud of you for not becoming like them, he clarified, placing a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. It takes a special kind of strength to stand up for the truth, especially when it's your own family you're standing up against. You have integrity, James. In this life, that's worth more than any house, any amount of money. He was right. I had stood up for myself. But in that moment it felt like a hollow, painful victory. My family was in tatters. My parents' marriage was likely fractured beyond repair. My brother's was on the rocks, and my relationship with all of them felt like a blasted landscape, smoking and ruined. My mother, before she and my father left in a stony, humiliated silence, had tried one last time. She had come to my guest room door. She didn't knock, just stood there, a shadow under the door. I knew it was her. I could feel her presence. James? She'd said, her voice small and stripped of all its usual authority. A voice I had never heard from her before. I didn't answer. I just stood on the other side of the door, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Please, she'd begged. A soft, desperate sound. I walked over to the door and leaned my forehead against the cool, painted wood. I love you, Mom, I said, my own voice hoarse with a sorrow that was deeper and more painful than anger. But I can't talk to you right now. You didn't respect me. You didn't even see me as a person. You saw me as a problem to be managed. When you're ready to talk about that, about the truth of what you did, then maybe we can talk. I heard a small, broken sound from the other side of the door, a choked sob, and then the sound of her footsteps retreating quickly down the hall. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't sworn. I had just set a boundary. For the first time in my 32 years of life, I had told her what I needed, instead of just silently accepting the scraps she was willing to give. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. And in that moment, staring at a blank door, I finally started to feel free. The month that followed that disastrous Christmas was a strange, sterile time of legal proceedings and quiet rebuilding. My grandfather, true to his word, was a force of nature. He moved with the kind of righteous purpose only a man of his age and conviction can possess. His lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright who wore power suits and an expression that could curdle milk, handled everything with brutal, beautiful efficiency. My parents were cooperative. They had no choice. To fight would be to admit guilt in a way that could have led to actual criminal charges. Something Ms. Albright made very clear to their own shell-shocked legal counsel in a single, icy phone call. So they signed the papers. They transferred the deed. They wrote me a check, drawn from what was left of their savings, for the full amount they had made from the Airbnb, plus an extra $10,000 my grandfather insisted upon for emotional distress and associated costs. I didn't want their money. The thought of it made me feel sick. But my grandfather and Emma both sat me down and insisted I take it. It's not about the money, James, Emma had explained, her lawyer brain kicking in. It's about restitution. It's the legal and financial acknowledgement of the wrong they committed. It closes the circle. Take it. So I did. I deposited the check, and I immediately transferred every penny of it into a new high-yield savings account. A fund I mentally labeled for a new college fund for my own kids someday, if I'm ever lucky enough to have them. It would be a fund built on a hard-learned lesson. Trust but verify. Emma was by my side through the whole process. She wasn't just my cousin or my lawyer anymore. She was my rock. She translated the dense legalese of the closing documents into plain English and celebrated with me on the phone when the final, official, recorded deed arrived in the mail. It had my name on it. James Wilson, sole owner. It was real. Uncle George was my other pillar of support. He took me out to lunch the day after I got the deed in my hand. "You handled that with class, kid," he said, raising his iced tea in a toast. "A lot of people would have gone for the throat, sued them into oblivion. You went for the truth instead. That takes guts. Speaking of which, I've got a project manager position opening up at my construction firm. It's a big step up from your current gig, better salary, more responsibility, a real career path. I've seen how you think, how you plan. I think you're ready for it. The job is yours if you want it." I was floored, completely blindsided. It was another gift, another vote of confidence, but this one felt different. This one I had earned, not through blood, but through my character in a moment of crisis. I accepted on the spot, my heart swelling with a gratitude that was pure and uncomplicated. Moving into the house was a surreal experience. It was empty now, scrubbed clean of my mother's decorating choices and the ghosts of the strangers who had slept in my bed. The silence was absolute. It was mine, all mine. But the victory felt quiet, almost lonely. I had won the war, but the battlefield was my own family, and the casualties were real and painful. My father called me once, about 2 weeks after I moved in. His voice was small, tentative, the voice of a defeated man. He apologized again, rambling about his financial fears, his shame, his weakness. I listened patiently. I told him I heard him, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words, "I forgive you," because I wasn't there yet. It would have been another lie, and I was done with lies. My mother didn't call. She wrote a long, 12-page, rambling letter in her perfect, looping cursive. It wasn't an apology. It was a justification, a grand tour of her own perceived victimhood. She wrote about the pressures she felt as a mother, about her deep-seated fears for my future. She even brought up Aunt Martha, writing a whole paragraph about how her sister's children were all so successful, and she just wanted me to have the same advantages. Even if I was too immature to see it. It was a masterclass in narcissistic reasoning, a symphony of self-pity. I read it, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity for her. She was so trapped in her own narrative of being the misunderstood martyr that she couldn't see the truth of her own actions. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and didn't reply. The most difficult and most surprising encounter was with my brother. About a month after I moved in, my doorbell rang one Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find Michael, standing on my new front porch, looking awkward and hopelessly out of place. He was holding a peace offering, a six-pack of my favorite hard-to-find IPA. "Hey," he said, not meeting my eye. "Hey," I said back. The silence stretched between us. I didn't invite him in. "Look," he finally stammered, his gaze fixed on a crack in the concrete walkway. I'm sorry. Okay. I was a coward. I was a lousy brother. There's no excuse for it. Jessica almost left me. She packed a bag. She said she couldn't be married to someone who would just stand by and watch that happen to their own brother. We're in counseling. She made me see a lot of things about myself I didn't want to see. He finally looked up at me, and for the first time in our lives, I didn't see the golden child, the smug, confident older brother. I just saw a guy who looked tired and lost. "I've spent my whole life doing what they wanted. Exactly what Mom wanted," he said, his voice quiet and raw. "Getting the right grades, the right job, the right wife, the right promotion. I never ever rocked the boat. And I saw what they were doing to you, and a part of me, a part I'm really ashamed of, was jealous." "Jealous?" I asked, the word sounding absurd. "Jealous of what?" "I was living in a crappy apartment while you were living in a McMansion. You were free," he said with a humorless, bitter laugh. "You were off their radar. You were building your own life, your own way, making your own mistakes. They were still managing every aspect of mine, right down to which investments I should make. And when Grandpa gave you the house, it was like he was saying you were the one who had made it on his own. And I hated that, so I said nothing. And that was the worst thing I've ever done. I'm really, truly sorry, James." It was the most honest, vulnerable thing he had ever said to me. The real, heartfelt apology I had desperately wanted from my parents had come from the one person I had never expected it from. I still didn't have the words, "I forgive you," in me. The wound was too deep, too fresh. But I reached out and took the six-pack of beer from his hand. The bottles were cold against my fingers. "Thanks for saying that, Michael," I said, my voice quiet. "I appreciate it. But we're going to need a lot of time." He nodded, a look of sad, resigned understanding on his face. "I know. I get it. I'll wait." He turned and walked back to his sleek, expensive car, a man starting his own long journey of rebuilding. I closed the door and put the beer in the fridge. It was a start. Maybe years from now it could be the foundation for a new kind of bridge between us. But for now it was just a six-pack of beer in an empty refrigerator, in a quiet, empty house that was finally completely mine. It's been 6 months since that Christmas, 6 months since my world cracked open and was rearranged. I took the job with my uncle and I love it. The work is challenging, the responsibility is real, and for the first time I feel like my skills are truly valued. I spend my weekends working on the house, not fixing catastrophic, imaginary problems my mother invented, but doing the real, tangible things that make a house a home. I painted the living room a deep, calming blue, the color of the Seattle sky on a rare, perfect summer day. I tilled the soil in the backyard and planted a small vegetable garden, something I'd always wanted to do. I spent a whole, back-breaking, wonderful Saturday sanding and refinishing the original hardwood floors myself, bringing the beautiful old wood back to life. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, felt like an act of reclaiming not just the physical space, but myself. It's quiet here. Sometimes on a Tuesday night when work is done and there's nothing on TV, it feels too quiet. The silence is a constant, humming reminder of the price I paid for this peace. My family is still broken, a fractured mirror. I speak to my aunt and uncle and my cousins regularly. They are my anchors. I exchange texts with Michael every now and then, small, tentative steps on a long, uncertain road. I haven't spoken to my parents. My father sends a text every few weeks. A simple "thinking of you, son." I don't reply. My mother has been silent. I'm not sure when or if I will be ready to bridge that particular chasm. Some betrayals are too deep. The other day, I was up on a ladder, carefully painting the trim around a window in what is now my office. I paused to look out at the yard, at the green shoots of my tomato plants pushing up through the dark soil. The sun was streaming in through the clean glass, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden sprites. And I smiled. It wasn't a big, triumphant grin. It wasn't the smile of a man who had won a great victory. It was a small, quiet smile of contentment, of peace. And in that quiet moment, I realized that standing up for myself wasn't really about the victory, about the dramatic confrontation in the living room. It wasn't about revenge. It was about what came after. It was about the quiet. It was about the freedom to choose the color of my own walls. It was about the right to build a life on a foundation of truth, not one built on the shifting, treacherous sands of other people's lies. This house is no longer just a gift or a piece of property. It's a monument. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes you have to be the one to light the match and burn down the life you knew in order to build the life you deserve. It's the house that truth built. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a strange and complicated thing. Family can be your greatest source of strength and sometimes your deepest source of pain. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up to your own family to fight for what was right? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories about finding your own strength. It helps more than you know.